Hey folks, today we're going to be talking about Frostclaw going into 1.2, specifically how the skill will be changing. If you do like this sort of thing, please consider leaving a like on the video, and I will keep making more of them. So this is going to be a bit more of a theory video. I'm not specifically touching on any one build because there are a few different ways that you can currently play Frostclaw, and that will continue to be the case going forward. There are, I guess, 4 main ways in 1.1 that people played Frostclaw. So the first one would be the Arcane Current Spark Charge thing. This node basically doesn't exist anymore. You can't play the same Spark Charge Frostclaw Sorcerer. However, you can still play Spark Charge Frostclaw with Elemental Nova, which is the old 1.0 style of Frostclaw. So that's still an option. And the third way that people played was crit based, and you can still do that as well. The fourth is ailments. So that would be like Ignite, Frostbite, other stuff like that. So before we specifically talk about the different ways you can play Frostclaw, let's talk exactly on what changed. So Hand of Morditis, it gained mana cost, but more importantly, it switched positions in the tree with Volley of Glass. So that's the shotgunning node. That's the big change as far as mana cost stuff. So basically that's these two nodes here. Volley of Glass used to be at the bottom, now Hand of Morditis is, and Hand of Morditis got +2 mana cost. What this means is that you can now choose to not grab the extra 2 nodes. So with Volley of Glass, you have 3 shotgunning projectiles. When you add this one, it goes from 3 to 5. Previously, you had to get only 5 shotgunning projectiles, which is a very high mana cost up front. But this being before Hand of Morditis now actually means you have different build paths that are completely viable. So first we'll talk about the ailment builds, and I think crit probably also falls under this category too because you're trying to maximize the Frostclaw hits. So the 1.1 style of the ailment builds is you basically go here, you would grab Hand of Morditis and Volley of Glass, and then you would grab this node here. So this would be 10 hits on an enemy when you hit them with Frostclaw. Kind of explain what that would look like. If you are here and the enemy is here, what would happen with this setup is you would shoot out, this is 5 projectiles, it would hit the enemy, and then continue on. It would hit 5 times going into the enemy, and 5 times as it leaves, so that's 10 hits. And you would also have 2 Novas, once on the bounce when it lands, once here. So you would be hitting with 10 Frostclaw hits and up to 2 with Novas. How I think you'll want to play ailment builds in 1.2 for Frostclaw would be, instead of taking this Hand of Morditis, which has a pretty high mana cost, what you can actually do instead is you can path here, which is only +2, and then go through here, which gives you an extra bounce. So that actually gives you extra hits, but you lose the 5, so you go from 5 shotgun to 3. And what that would look like instead would be something like this. So if we have the enemy here, you shoot a Frostclaw at them, and it bounces away. And then you also have a return to you. Now all of these lines are only doing 3 hits, so you get 3 going in, 3 coming out, and 3 coming out back towards you. So this is 9 total instead of 10, but the advantage to this is you have a Nova, that's terrible. You have a Nova here, a Nova centered on the enemy, and another Nova here. These are probably all hitting the enemy, so you get 3 sets of hits of Frostclaw, and you get 3 Novas, and it is lower mana cost. I have updated my mana cost calculator for 1.2, so check out that link in the description of the video if you want to try putting together your own Frostclaw build. This will probably be useful. So you can see here, this is the example that I'm highlighting. You would take Volley of Glass, not Hand of Morditis, on through the snow, Frozen Malice, Crack in the Ice. You can see here, max hits would be 9, but it also has 3 Novas instead of 2 with the previous setup. So this one here right below it is the previous one. You used to get 10 with 2 novas. And the mana cost, this is like base before all of the increases. So you save 2 mana, you gain an extra nova, and you only lose 1 hit. If you have a little bit more mana to spare, there's 2 different ways that you can get to 15 hits, and they both cost the same amount of mana. However, one of them is objectively better than the other. One option is to take Ever Onward, and then you could do the Frozen Malice bounce back tech that I showed in my video. The other option, which is this, with this you get the same amount of hits, you have the same mana cost, but you don't have to do the really weird aiming thing with the Frozen Malice. The downside versus this, if you do the Ever Onward, you can potentially get the same amount of hits with Frostclaw for the same mana cost, but you get 2 extra Elemental Novas. So if you're getting a lot of your damage from Elemental Novas, this would be better. If you're just getting most of your ailments or whatever it is applied by the Frostclaw itself, then this is what you would want if you can support the mana cost. And then finally, the last step would be if you add Ever Onward, if you can afford the mana cost of all of these nodes, this would get you to a max of 25 hits of Frostclaw and 5 Elemental Novas. The key takeaway here is that as you have more mana to support the cost of Frostclaw, you can add more hits to the skill, and therefore more damage, through several objectively useful combinations of nodes in the Frostclaw tree. And there's some combinations that will just be worse than others. So these are highlighted here in this chart. So try to avoid the ones that are just generally bad, and you should have a pretty good time. For the Nova build, so that would be, this is my build from 1.1. You can actually still do the same thing because you never really took Volley of Glass to begin with. You could just path down and grab the Volley of Glass. Now that it's more accessible, you don't need the Hand of Merditis, but I still don't really know if it's worth it. Also on this sheet, I've included some different examples of what the base mana cost would look like with different sets of minus mana on different weapons. So here's an example of a -3 wand, like Mad Alchemist Ladle, -5, like Wrong Warp, -7 would be like a Firestarter plus a T5 minus mana cost to spells, and then -9 would be something like a Firestarter with a T7 minus mana cost to spells. As soon as you go above 0 mana cost for a spell, you can't cast it when you're negative anymore. So that's just one interesting thing about mana cost here. And then the other thing to note is the Gift of Winter is actually giving you mana. So even if you are slightly positive in the mana, because of Gift of Winter, you're still going to be net positive on your regen per second. So you can see here, if you can get to 0 mana costs and you're casting 250% cast speed with Gift of Winter, you're actually a mana generator with Frostclaw. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff here. Anyway, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.